Doctor, I have. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were on vacation in Aruba with your wife, but still were so disturbed by your thoughts that you decided to write a paper while you were on vacation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's definitely correct.
Why is it that I seem like the only one as concerned as you are? No, finally, I felt like when the New York Post wrote about it yesterday, and they're even still a little, uh, they'll do it for the buys. But I mean, when the New York Post wrote about it, I was like, finally, people are catching on to this. I mean, this man is telling us that there is something that potentially could be dangerous to us on multiple levels. And I feel like this is the top story, but yet people are talking about Trump's thinning hair today.
Well, it does get attention. We are used to looking down and getting worried about the conflicts here on Earth, but we should also consider threats from above. And, we always talk about the existential risk from artificial intelligence, from maybe climate change, perhaps an asteroid impact, but nobody talks about the risk from alien tech visiting us. And we are in a new era now because we are discovering objects that came from outside the solar system to the inner part close to Earth. And we would like to know, I would like to know whether any of them might be technological. Obviously, most of them might be rocks. If we imagine objects coming to our backyard from the street, it could be a lot of rocks, but every now and then there might be a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. And it's really important to find those because the question is, how should we respond? And is this technology much more superior to what we have? If it is, we have to be worried about it because it would be similar to the experience that the Iranian air defense had with the B-2 bombers overhead.
Right. We've had Dr. Kaku on the show. Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
And yes, and I had asked Dr. Kaku because you have to understand we're very simple people over here. I said to him, I said, why do we always assume that alien technology that is coming over to us is more advanced than we are? And I believe his answer made it shockingly real for me, is that we have not learned how to fly at light speed yet. And for this thing to be traveling to us at 135,000 miles per hour, they have figured out how to travel safely at that speed. Therefore, their intelligence is higher than ours.
No, that is not a correct answer, actually, because well, first of all, because traveling very fast, close to the speed of light, is risky. There are lots of there is a lot of dust in interstellar space, and if you impact it close to the speed of light, it's more the amount of energy released per mass that you intercept is more than a nuclear explosion. It's really risky to do that. I chaired a project that was designing a spacecraft moving at a fifth of the speed of light. And believe me, to get to the nearest star, you may do it, but across the galaxy, it's very difficult because of everything you impact along the way that will come at you at a very high speed. But it doesn't require the speed of light. In fact, if you ask where would Voyager be in a billion years, it will be on the opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy. Our own technology, rocket technology, allows you to travel throughout the Milky Way galaxy, the entire galaxy, in about 10% of the age of the Milky Way galaxy. So, and most of the stars from billions of years before the sun, there was plenty of time for any products of technological civilizations to reach us by now. The sun, we are late to the party. The sun formed only in the last 1/3 of cosmic history, and there might have been much more accomplished civilizations before us. And if we see something entering our backyard, it may be from a highly developed civilization. We sent out probes like Voyager, Pioneer, New Horizons that are making their way out of the solar system, and they will exit the solar system, the outskirts of the Oort cloud, in about 10,000 years. At that point, they will not be functional anymore. They would be just space trash.
Right.
We were not ambitious enough yet to send out devices that will be functional as when they reach other stars. That requires a civilization to be far more advanced than we are and more ambitious, and we are routinely thinking about what happens close to us, but we don't think about the long-term future of humanity, going to the stars and, making sure that we will never disappear, because if we send out a lot of settlements in many different places, then even if a catastrophe occurs in one of them, we are guaranteed to maintain our sort of tradition of human intelligence. So we have not been that ambitious, but if someone gets to our backyard with functional devices, it means that they are more advanced than we are, because they did it already.
Sure.
We didn't even dream about it, and in that sense, we can learn from them. But the risk is that you could imagine a friendly encounter or a hostile encounter, but even a friendly encounter might be in the form of a Trojan horse that looks friendly, but then brings something that you don't expect. So we should be suspicious. Now, there is no organization right now that worries about such threats, and I think it makes sense to establish it, because there is a new observatory called the Rubin Observatory in Chile that was just inaugurated a few weeks ago. And it will use a camera with 3.2 gigapixels to survey the southern sky every 4 days. And it should discover an interstellar object every few months. And, there will be more than 50 of them probably discovered over the next decade. And we should just check whether each and every one of them is natural and not a technological object. There should be an organization that includes policymakers that decide what to do. And then, there should be a risk scale similar to the Richter scale that we use with earthquakes to assess the risk.
But how would we assess the risk if we've not had any experience with it before? I mean, how would we even imagine what it could be?
Oh, no, you don't need to imagine. Okay, so you just need to check whether it looks familiar. If it looks like an asteroid, like a rock, if it behaves like a rock,
sure.
Then it's a rock. If it has a plume of gas and dust around it, like a comet, then it will be cataloged as natural. So in such an organization, you need comet experts that will tell us this one is 0 on the scale of risk.
Well, where do you stand with 31 Atlas? Why is this one particularly?
So 3i Atlas was strange in my mind the minute I heard about it, because it was discovered at a distance of 4.5 times the Earth-Sun separation, and yet it was discovered with a telescope that is only half a meter in diameter. That's the kind of telescope that some amateur astronomers use. And the reason is because it was relatively bright. If it was a solid object, then it should have been 20 kilometers in diameter, bigger than Manhattan Island, bigger, twice as large as the rock that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. So it's a giant object. Now, there is a problem with a giant object. There is just not enough material in interstellar space to make such a giant rock and send it our way every few years. I mean, this one was discovered after a few years of surveying the sky. And I suggested that the simplest solution would be if it's less than a kilometer in size, and then it's surrounded by a cloud of dust, in which case it would be a comet. The problem is we haven't detected yet the signatures of molecules of gas around it. All we saw is this object is red. The color is red. The reflected sunlight from it is red, but that could be coming from its surface. A lot of objects in the outskirts of the solar system are red. So it might well be that when it comes closer to the sun, it's making its way now towards the sun.
Right.
Then it will evaporate much more clearly, and then we would see a plume of gas and dust, and it would appear to be clearly a comet, in which case we shouldn't worry too much. But then I also noticed with two colleagues, we wrote a paper saying that its trajectory is very unusual because the trajectory is in the plane of the orbit of the Earth around the sun, and within 5 degrees. And the chance of that happening at random is 0.2%.
Wow.
So it's aligned with the orbital plane of the inner planets. It will come very close to Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. The chance of that happening, even taking the orbit and just changing the arrival time, the chance of it being so close to these planets is 1 in 20,000. It's really small. And also when it arrives closest to the sun, and by the way, mark your calendar, that would be October 29th, 2025. When it gets closest to the sun, the Earth would be on the opposite side of the sun. We wouldn't be able to
We
observe
won't
it.
see it. Yeah.
We won't see it. So the question is, was that by design? Because that is the point in the trajectory when it can actually break thanks to the gravity of the sun and come at us, so to speak.
So now it sounds like there was some planning involved. Like if somebody was
that's the reason I said we should consider that possibility. It also came from the direction of the center of the Milky Way galaxy that is very crowded with stars, and that makes it difficult to detect. And if you wanted to hide yourself, that would be the direction you come from. So I said, let's monitor it. If it doesn't come out from the other side of the sun on October 29th, after October 29th, perhaps the stock market will crash.
Yeah.
I got a text message from a fan that said, I traded options against the volatility of the market that will expire on October 29th, 2025. So some people are trying to perhaps make money if it happens to be technological.
Okay, so when you first, how do you approach this to say to somebody? Are you fear being laughed at when you present this to other people?
Not at all. You see, the privilege of doing science is that you're allowed to ask questions.
Yes.
Then you find the answers by seeking the evidence. Okay, so we should be guided by evidence. Now, many of my colleagues actually are adopting a different approach. They pretend to be the adults in the room, and they ridicule questions.
Right.
That's not professional. That's anti-science. Science allows all questions to be asked, and then the way for us to figure out the correct answer is by collecting data. So my goal was to encourage observers to get as much data as possible about this object, because the worst we can do is ignore it, as in the case of a previous object, Oumuamua, that was very unusual. And so if we get a lot of data, we will figure out what it is. If it looks like a comet, it's natural. One thing that I learned from history is the Vatican put Galileo Galilei in house arrest when they didn't like his assertion that we are not at the center of the universe.
Right.
If they were taking a different approach of looking through telescopes to prove him wrong, then they would have corrected themselves much earlier. It took them 350 years after his death to announce in 1992 that he was right, that the Earth is not at the center. But if they were to look through telescopes to prove him wrong, they would have retracted their claim long before that. So I really want to encourage anyone that wants to prove me wrong to just collect as much data as possible. Because in that case, if there are anomalies, you won't be able to shove them under the carpet of traditional thinking.
Are you convinced in your studies that if there is another civilization that is making their way here, their intent is most likely hostile and most likely to take our resources? I mean, is that the only reason they would come here?
No, if I had to guess, I would say we are not that significant. We keep thinking that we are at the center of the universe, that if they come here, they will really care about us. But, if just imagine ants in the cracks of a pavement when someone walks down the street, that someone is not aware of the ants, and they think that everything revolves around them. I see us in the same way. We are self-centered. We keep thinking that everything is about us. I had a visit by a group of religious scholars from the organization Christianity Today.
Right.
They came to ask me, what would happen if we discover extraterrestrials? How would that affect their religious beliefs? And I said, look, I have two daughters. When the second one was born, it didn't take away any of my love to the first one. So imagining that God can attend only to one civilization is very limiting. It's as if you imagine that a parent can take care only of one kid.
Yes. And also, it kind of shows you how selfish some religions are to really assume that that is their main concern, is how it's going to affect their religion.
Yeah, we are very self-centered. That's my conclusion. And looking up requires some sense of humility. We are not that great.
Right.
There is room for improvement. And one reason that I'm seeking higher intelligence in interstellar space is because I don't often find it here on Earth.
It's very interesting, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to speak with you. I didn't feel like we were smart enough to have you on the show, but I appreciate you.
Oh no! I mean, by the way, I was born on a farm. I think of myself as simple-minded. I'm just not willing to surrender to the pressure of traditional thinking. I think thinking outside the box and innovating in science is really important, and especially because the public cares about it. We have a carpenter that is fixing the porch at my home, and he came to my wife and asked her about the latest news on my research,
Right.
Without me knowing him. Also, when she went for an oil change, the person, the auto mechanic, asked her about my work, seeing the last name. And to me, it illustrates the fact that this subject is of great interest to people. And I feel much more comfortable with non-professionals, because people in academia lost their contact with the public, and I see as our duty as scientists to address questions that are of great interest to the public.
Well, I am certainly very interested in it. I had started reading this back in early July, and right away when you read it, you kind of blow it off. I don't know enough about it. But then when I followed your story in your paper, and I said, why isn't everyone talking about this? Even if it turns out to be nothing, to be a comet, we absolutely should be paying attention to this.
Exactly. I think so as well. It's just that we are really obsessed with what happens around us.
Yeah.
Because it happens around us, so it takes our attention. But, we should be better than that. And there is much more real estate beyond the Earth, and a lot of things are happening out there. I'm really curious to know if there is a smarter kid on our block, and what can we learn from that kid. And
I am too.
We should approach it with a sense of humility. My hope is that it will bring good to humanity, to Earth, sort of like a messianic time when we would realize that everything we've been doing until now was just a waste of time, that there is something much bigger out there.
Yeah, until you compared us to ants in a crack, it made me feel very vulnerable when you said that. But the reality of that is very true. If people want to find out more about you, what is the best place for them to go and research you and the 3i Atlas?
So every couple of days, I post an essay on medium.com. So you just search for Avi Loeb, Loeb, AVI-Loeb, .medium.com, and you would see my essays. Actually, this morning I posted a new essay saying that there is a spacecraft called Juno that was launched a while ago to study Jupiter. It's in orbit around Jupiter. They were thinking of driving it to plunge into Jupiter's atmosphere, because it's the end of the mission now in September 2020, just within 2 months from now. And I calculated with my collaborators that if you just fire the engine and give it a boost of 2.7 kilometers per second, it could actually intercept 3i Atlas when it comes closest to Jupiter around March 14th, 2026. So there is an opportunity to rejuvenate Juno, and because it was anyway, planned for destruction, and so we can use it to actually intercept 3I Atlas and learn much more about it. That would be amazing if done. And NASA has to look into. I hope that they will look into that and fund such a change in the objectives of Juno before the end of its life.
Wow, that would be amazing. I listen, I'm paying attention now. I'm going to go and look at your essay, and I'm going to pay attention to this, because I feel like even if this turns out to be absolutely nothing, we should be more cognizant of what is above us, like you said, and constantly making that, where we stand in relativity. I can't get that out.
Yeah.
Where we stand based on in this whole solar system.
Exactly, which is our neighborhood. You can also think of it as a way of making money if you happen to recognize something before other people do.
Dr. Loeb, thank you very much for joining us on the show, and we'll continue to keep an eye on 3I Atlas.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thank you, sir. That was great. There you go. Dr. Avi Loeb.